Ja, herzlich willkommen, meine sehr geehrten.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this press briefing of the Foreign Minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock. We are moving towards the last hours and days of COP, and the Foreign Minister will report to you. Madam Minister, you have the floor. Hello. We will stay with an image from sports. These are decisive hours at the COP. In basketball, one would say we are approaching crunch time now. And as is the case for a crunch time in general, the clock is ticking relentlessly. The game gets a bit rougher. And all experts here in the room who have attended many COPs before know that this is the case for almost every COP, and still is the case now. And that's a good thing, because what we had seen so far in terms of text was certainly not something that meant we could just relax and go home. This COP conference, and that has always been clear, is a COP about finances, to make clear how we can deal with these loss and damage issues and the huge adaptation measures until 2035, and how we can adjust to the new climate conditions. But it has always also been clear that climate funding cannot work without mitigation, CO2 mitigation. We will not be able to pay for all the damage in the world if we do not move towards the 1.5-degree track as fast as we can, because every tenth of a degree in global warming makes the damage so much more expensive. So for us as the European delegation, it has been so essential that what we had reached in Dubai in this regard when it comes to mitigation, that this is preserved and that we build on this in terms of climate funding for the future. Apparently, some had a different goal here, that is turning back the clock when it comes to mitigation and everything we had agreed on about this in Dubai last year. It was often said, we often heard that Saudi Arabia said that what has been decided was not something that should appear again in the texts. Climate financing, however, does not work without mitigation, CO2 mitigation, and mitigation needs financing so that everybody can mitigate. It is in this spirit that we negotiate as the European delegation, and we are intensively negotiating the texts, and on the basis of what we have decided last year, that is tripling renewable energies, doubling energy efficiency, and also phasing out fossil fuels. Because this is essential for the fact that the money that we can mobilize now can be used for countries that, that have not yet benefited, do not fall behind. We need climate financing to accelerate the energy transition in countries where it hasn't made headway yet, in order to expand energy storage devices, expand grids, and states that still have fossil fuel plants, help these states phasing out coal, as we are doing in Europe. And this is a question of climate justice as well, that the countries that know very well that we cannot do business as usual in terms of CO2, that we help them to master the green transition at home. This is also essential for the fact that the next climate conference in Belém becomes a success, because, as you know, we will we take a new look at the NDCs then and give them a stronger foundation. This means strong commitments to mitigation. Europe will make an ambitious goal here, will have an ambitious goal, but without a clear commitment to what has already been decided, that is the end of the fossil age, these NDCs cannot be drafted. In the spirit that we made this climate bridge across continents already last year between states that think of mitigation and financing going hand in hand, we want to move ahead in this spirit. So we had many talks last night and this morning in order to forge this climate coalition across continents in the same way we succeeded in Dubai last year. And this clearly means that we need a new approach in terms of climate financing. Three things are essential for that. Of course, a quantum that is a number for 2035. The European delegation has already made clear that we will live up to our responsibility. Europe is a reliable partner and will live up to its responsibility until 2035 as well. And we are a partner you can trust in, so we cannot just talk about figures that are not backed by funding. We can only live up to our responsibility if we have a broader donor basis for this new funding mechanism. And that means that the big new emitters as well, who can afford it, need to get involved through development banks, but also through bilateral measures and beyond. It is clear that we do no longer live in the world of 1992, and the answers from the 90s of the last century cannot be the answers of the world of 2024 or even 2030. So we need to give answers that are up to the world we live in today. And thirdly, that means that when it comes to climate financing, we need to establish an honest structure. We need access to financing, especially for those countries that suffer most from climate impacts. We need security for those emerging countries, meaning that if they are hit by a climate disaster in a way that all their economic potential is affected by it, that they too can benefit in that moment. We need to be honest about the question of what loans are and what grants are. We need to work together on further developing our financial institution, and that also means restructuring of debt canceling, and so forth. And we as Europeans are willing to do that. I've made it clear again and again over the last year that Europe wants to lead up front with their own ambitions, with their own responsibility, living up to its own responsibility, but also in a way that you do not make promises you cannot live up to, but that we agree on things together that we can live up to. And last year we mustered the strength, and I appeal to everyone. And even though I do not feel so well, I still will stay here, and we will muster our strength to live up to this joint responsibility and get back on track. Because it is obvious, we do not only see it at this COP, we see it everywhere in the world, that there are actors in the world who want to prevent exactly that. We've seen it at the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York in September, where most countries wanted to do everything they could to agree again on the basis of the UN Charter, because the international rules-based order is the best for all states in the world, especially those that do not have the biggest military or economic power, and the same is true here. The best protection for most states in this world is to come together to live up to our responsibility, and knowing that the stronger ones can do more in order to address the climate challenges of our time. We need all states across continents. We need climate bridges, and we also need, and I'm saying this as a female German representative, this needs everyone on board, all people, men and women. So it was not only me who was a bit irritated yesterday, but a very big group of female heads of delegations to realize that exactly on Gender Day, some had the idea to ask whether this gender issue or women's issue was still so important. And I can tell you from the tough negotiations I have about life and death and peace, you can best make peace if women are at the table. If women are not at the table, peace contracts won't last very long. We've seen that again and again. And the same is true for the climate crisis. It is women and girls that suffer most from the impacts of climate change, 14 times more than men. But women also make the most important contribution to making sure that climate policy and dovetailed thinking of sustainability, climate action, and human and economic development works on the ground. And I would like to highlight once more that we will not be involved in a backlash when it comes to climate justice and gender equality at this COP. But it is also our strongest motivation to make it clear that climate action only works with and for everyone in this world. In that spirit, there is a rocky road ahead for the next hours. We need what one would call a three-pointer in basketball, or we will have to play over time. We are excited to see what it will be in the end. But one thing is clear, we will do everything we can until the end to live up to our responsibility at this COP as well, because we owe it to everyone. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Es gibt Fragen.
Thank you. Questions? Lara Pfeffer, RTL and TV. Ms. Baerbock, you just said it. There is a group here speaking up against gender issues. Part of them is the Vatican. Do you have a message to the Pope here? Well, one should always choose one's friends well, otherwise you will end up alone, and you should not underestimate women. So it's always good to have women by your side. The gentleman in the front.
Has Russia's use of an intercontinental ballistic missile changed your thinking on allowing Ukraine to use German Taurus missiles?
Could you hold the microphone a bit closer?
Of course. Has Russia's use of an intercontinental ballistic missile changed your thinking on allowing Ukraine to use German Taurus missiles?
Like yesterday, we see also here at the press conference, but I'm underlining it also the whole day, so this is probably just normal, that geopolitics also plays an important role here at the climate conference. And with regard to your question, I mean, we are faced with a situation since 1,000 days on our European continent that Russia, which is part of our European family, has attacked the European, so far, our peace order. And as many countries around the world facing war times, it means that we are in a situation where, while we are trying to do everything to deliver on all the other crises around the world, like the climate crisis, we are faced with a reality that the first thing our citizens, our children ask ourselves is, do we still live in peace on our continent also in the upcoming years? And unfortunately, this question, not like in the past, can be answered with a simple yes. Because we have seen within these 1,000 days that the Russian president is not only attacking Ukraine, but that he is leading a hybrid warfare against other European actors, like my own countries. We are being faced with cyber attacks. We are suddenly finding parcels with explosive materials which are supposed to go on our airplanes. And we are faced especially with our Eastern European partners like the Baltic countries, Poland, our big neighbor from German side, directly at the border to Ukraine, that obviously Putin tries to divide Europe and tries to push Europe in the corner by a huge refugee flow, by attacking Kiev and whole Ukraine so heavily as we haven't seen in the last 1,000 days, and also with missiles which haven't been used before. The only purpose is that we resign to support Ukraine, and by that standing up for our European peace order. But playing with fear, was a recipe which Putin used already before February 24th. And we did the big mistakes that we underestimated that. We have learned since 1,000 days that the best protection of our European peace is to support Ukraine in its self-defense until Putin stops this horrible war.
Okay. Dann gehen wir weiter.
We'll go to the back. The lady over here, could you please stand up when you ask your question?
Especially thank you for highlighting the specific burden on women and children of the climate crisis. What we hear a lot around climate discussions and spaces is that young people are kind of an argument for older generations' action. My name is Carlotta Altmans, and I'm part of the International Federation of Medical Students Associations, and we represent more than 1.5 million medical students from across the world. We advocate for health and climate and other justice issues. However, we also often face obstacles when it comes to youth advocacy. So my question would be, as we as young people will be the ones bearing today's decisions and action or inaction, how will you ensure meaningful youth involvement in climate negotiation and decision-making spaces? Thank you.
I will switch back to German. It's safer. Zuerst erstmal herzlichen Dank.
First of all, thank you very much to you as a youth delegate and to all the young people who are committed to climate action in so many areas. You come from the medical sector, and this illustrates very well that the climate crisis is more than just a question of environmental issues or climate protection, climate action. It has always been the wrong framing in the past. It's not about protecting the climate. The climate doesn't care about colder or warmer temperatures. It's about protecting humans. And we've seen it across the globe. We've seen it in Europe, but also in other places of the world where it's even hotter or even more dry, that climate protection, climate action is the best health prevention as well. So it's important that also from a health perspective, we make it clear again and again that in our healthcare systems, costs will be too high if we were to end up in a 3-degree world or a 2.7-degree world. But climate action is not only protecting humans and protecting human health, it is also the best policy for industry and the economy if you want to invest in the future. Bringing this together in our thinking is so important, and I think this is why there are so many startups in this area. There are young people asking, what is my business model that is still a viable one in 20 to 30 years' time? And not only focusing on the next quarter. So this is an important perspective. It needs to be brought up again and again. What does it mean for my life, for the life of my children in the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years? That is essential. And as a small anecdote, I'd like to say, not my first COP, but one of my most important COPs, for many people the most important COPs, because was 2015 where we decided on the Paris Agreement, and my second daughter was only a few months old, so I brought her with me. I was still nursing her, and when I got my suitcase ready, I was a simple MP, and I imagined the world my daughter would be living in. And it was a small coincidence that I was 35 back then, and in 2015, thinking of 2035, she will be my age, 35. She will live in 2050 when she's 35, and I hope I will still be alive then. And she will ask me, Mom, how did you succeed in avoiding this climate disaster? Or she will ask me why we didn't prevent a world in which you don't know snow in Europe anymore. In other places, you will not be able to live because it's impossible to live there. And have this in mind is the responsibility of the older generations represented here. And having younger people on board is also what makes these COPs so powerful. There are not so many conferences including so many civil society actors and young people, but it truly makes COPs stronger and better. So thank you very much for being here. This is what it is about. We are negotiating the future of future generations and of young generations today. Thank you. We'll go to the back. Mr. Geinitz. Christian Geinitz, FAZ. Madam Minister, yesterday you said that with the Loss and Damage Fund and what has been achieved in Dubai last year was something like a model for how the result we could have for climate funding here. What makes you so optimistic that the donor basis of last year only includes two countries like the UAE and South Korea that were added, and the same is true for the Green Climate Fund that also should mobilize funds to reach the 100 billion. So how can this be a role model for this year? Because, as we know, it is always difficult to get started, and establishing a new mindset, meaning that we can no longer continue to use the text of 1992, is something that we've not only seen last year, but we also succeeded the years before in asking ourselves how can we create a fund that benefits mostly the most vulnerable states and at the same time has the power, has more power and a broader donor basis. Now, we found a new approach, meaning that we work more strongly with financial institutions like the World Bank. There are other states who are willing to get engaged, but who do not want to be listed in that fund, but use other financial institutions to make a contribution. And this is not about finger pointing. Let me be very clear here. And I can understand that some countries say we are sort of a developing country and at the same time one of the most modern industrialized countries. It's not about finger pointing. It is about living up to our joint responsibility. And if this needs some small detours, it is also helpful. What cannot be the case is that you just shy away from your own responsibility and in the end even blame others due to geopolitical interests. So we want to have transparency. We think it is important, and this is why we make this suggestion that we have voluntary contributions. This was the concept of the Loss and Damage Fund, where everyone can make clear whether they can and want to make a contribution, and taking in development banks that are financed from different regions in the world also makes sense, and also the private sector plays an important role, of course. And as I am the foreign minister, I would like to say that we can learn a lot from COP for other international conflicts, but COP can also learn from other areas too. We have a similar discussion, or had a similar discussion, and this question came up yesterday when it comes to financing for humanitarian aid through UN organizations such as UNRWA. And there has been a long discussion. Some countries have said they won't pay into that. Now, we mustered the strength not only for Germany being one of the biggest donors, but also countries making contributions that haven't done so in a long time. So that would be my appeal in these times as well. Some things are so difficult, so complex, and huge challenges. We can only do it together, and we need to be willing to take a step towards one another and reach out to each other. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. That brings us to the end of our press conference. There might be more questions, but I'm sure we can take them at a later stage. Thank you very much.